Hey everyone, apologies for the delay today. We've had a couple of audio issues, but hopefully that's all sorted now, fingers crossed. Um, so today we're doing a beginner's stream again, and we're looking at hidden deployment. So we've just got a range of different hidden deployment models, which Perzan is kindly taking out of the bags for me. And what we're going to be focusing on is issues such as the placement and deployment of your hidden deployed models, and then we're going to look a little bit more in depth at reactive hidden deployed models and active turn hidden deployed models. Probably won't be a particularly long class for today, because obviously hidden deployed isn't the widest subject, but there should be a little bit to go through. Um, so with that said, Perzan, have you got most of the models that you want to kind of talk about?
In me, just I know the name of other, so
Sure.
they come in, they fall into a categories. Like one is a bit like broader.
Mhm.
There are two that are definitely
Yeah.
like special
Mhm.
here.
Okay. Yeah. So we've got some reactive turn hidden deploys. So we've got the Noctifer, the Hexer, and the Swiss Guard. We've got some more like active turn gunfighting ones. We've got the Hexer, Spitfire, the Anathematic. We've got some tags. And then on the far right, we've got a final group, which is like your hidden deployed specialists. So there's the Hexer hacker, the Tuareg hacker, and the Ninja hacker as well. So that's a decent selection of like different hidden deployed
Yeah.
models that we can look at.
Most of the hidden deployment models will also have infiltration, but not all of
Yes,
them will. Some will
most of
just
them.
have forward deployment, and
Right.
some will have no forward deployment at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the tags notably don't have any level of forward deployment or anything.
Yes.
Cool.
But
Right. When
I I can
cool. Persian's ping is quite high at the moment, so you're kind of coming and going a little bit. Um, anyway, so I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about first of all was the placement of the hidden deployed models. And the first thing to bear in mind is looking at the role of the hidden deployed model. So the first thing to note is obviously the point of hidden deployment is you don't place the model on the table at all. So your opponent has no idea where the model is, if it's in your list, etc., etc. So when you hand over a courtesy list to your opponent, it won't feature, the model on the list. And unlike camouflage, which places a marker, with hidden deployment you don't place anything down whatsoever. So they have no idea it's there, right? Um, and so when it comes to deployment, you really want to maximize the sense of surprise that comes from hidden deployment, right? And so there are different ways of doing that. With your hidden deployed ARO pieces, I'm just going to grab one of them. I think I'll grab the Noctifer, I guess. The Noctifer is like the most common one.
yes.
Um, so there are a couple of interesting considerations because whilst your opponent won't know that you're playing the hidden deployed model, if you hand over a courtesy list with 14 models in it, it's quite likely they're going to guess that you're playing something like that. Right, Persian?
Exactly.
Right. So there are a couple of different options. So this is a Noctifer missile launcher. It's an ARO piece, right? So it appears out of nowhere. The opponent doesn't know where it is, and it takes its missile launcher shot. On the one hand, you can benefit from this by placing it in a rather obvious fire lane. So something like this. I placed it back here. Something like that, for example.
Yeah.
Now, the advantage of placing it somewhere like this is, you've got some brilliant sight lines. You can see all the way down to this kind of car back here. You can see over to here. You might even have a line to here as well. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, you do. The downside is that placing a model here can be quite obvious to your opponent. They might, have their eye on this corner here and think, well, if I was playing a hidden deployed missile launcher, I would probably put it there, right? So there's something to be said about taking less conventional locations as well. So you might consider perhaps moving your hidden deployment off to one side. Arguably, I haven't had a great deal of time to look at this map, but for example, you might move it off to the side here. Although they could approach from the left, so that's not actually ideal.
That's great. No, it's a great spot, especially if you have some other arrows that, especially like here,
right,
that they would look to approach from this angle to get into like fire. So this is a great spot.
So you can layer up your arrows.
Yeah, like you already talked about the thing about N4 that is the biggest hurdle about hidden deployment is that the lists are basically if you hand over a 14 model Kurt's list, it's a giveaway that there is something up. And this is also a strategy. You can build lists that project the threat of a hidden deployment. And I think that's for later.
Yeah, so we need to bear in mind that whilst hidden deployment models aren't on the table, your opponent will usually know what's up because most people try and fit 15 models into their list. Not all the time, but quite a lot of the time. Therefore, when thinking about placing your hidden deployment model, it's sometimes advantageous to place them off to one side or in a slightly unusual location. And the point of that is that a good opponent will actually have some inclination of what you're doing. So instead of placing the Noctifer, right in the middle, like, I don't know, here or something like that, the first places any opponent would expect you to put an ARO piece, there is something to be said sometimes of just going over to one side. Because you really want to maximize the surprise element of your hidden deployment, otherwise you're not really playing into the strengths of the model.
Yes, now there is another consideration also. You can double up on your ARO pieces with hidden deployment models. So let's say you have a TR bot or like a linked missile launcher guy or like a linked sniper guy, and you still have, you can deploy them so that when the enemy actually comes and tries to fight your TR bot or your main ARO piece, then you spring the surprise and make him either divide burst and make him less likely to win the face-to-face roll, or actually decide to put all the bursts into one and possibly suffer an unopposed hit.
Absolutely. So another strong thing you can do with a hidden deployment piece is to have it overlap with another piece you have. So as Perzan just said, if you've got a total reaction remote or some other ARO piece on one side, you might want to place your hidden deployment so that it's overlooking slightly similar fire lanes. And by doing that, you can make it so that when your opponent does come around the corner to shoot at your ARO piece that they can see, you suddenly spring the trap and you throw your hidden deployment model in as well. And then your opponent has to decide whether they're going to split their burst between both of the ARO pieces or if they're going to take an unopposed shot. And it's nasty either way. So that's a really, really nice way of doing things, particularly because some people won't expect the fact that you will kind of overlap or have two ARO pieces in a similar location. It can catch some people by surprise. So that's focusing mainly on reactive hidden deployment models. As we've said in prior kind of classes about ARO pieces and things, the usual stuff applies, like maximizing your fire lane coverage but not in such a way that you're too exposed, etc, etc. So it comes with all the usual caveats of ARO pieces. But the thing about hidden deployment that we've discussed here that's a little bit different is just maximizing surprise and maybe overlapping your coverage with something else. There are, of course, other classes of hidden deployed models. You've got your active turn pieces, so Perzan's just placed a Sphinx over here, which is a tag and a very effective active turn hidden deployed. And I think you've placed a couple of specialists in the middle somewhere. Did you have a Tuareg a
Yeah,
second ago?
yeah, I have it like
Oh,
here
there.
in
Okay.
the forest.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the midfield specialist hidden deployments, or would you rather
Uh,
focus on the tag?
I think the tag is the juiciest one. Leave it for later. Like the
Okay, cool.
specialists are more common. Hidden deployment specialists, especially in missions, where you have to grab a thing at the end of the game. They are very good at doing it, I would say. So it's either like a killer hacker ninja or a Tuareg hacker doctor or hacker. And the cool thing about a killer hacker, you actually don't want to spring him up, because like a normal hacker, you might think about actually bringing him up when a tag comes around. And this is also a very good strategy, but if the mission clicking then you actually want to wait for the last turn and then spring this hidden deployment guy, and then using the marker state, just walk casually towards the console, and the enemy can only discover you or hold, and if they discover you, you still have your second order if you have them, and then you can just click the console and maybe die a horrible death if they are boss, and possibly secure the win with the objective. So
Yeah,
that's a common
absolutely.
use of this specialist.
Yeah. So,
The thing to remember is they are susceptible to mines, because a mine will still explode on a camo marker, but they will not be attacked by koalas and other advanced
yeah,
players.
so mines go off on them.
Mhm.
So there are a number of missions in the current ITS packet that score significant points at the end of the game, or that have a large advantage to second turn. So some missions, for example, like Quadrant Control, score at the end of every game round, and a couple of other missions score certain things at the end of the game. Hidden deployment specialists, or hidden deployment models in general, are really, really effective in these missions, because what you can do is you can pop them up in the very last turn so that there's very little counterplay to them, and use them to very quickly swing the mission. So, for example, if it's a mission like Quadrant Control, you can pop up your hidden deployed dudes and suddenly put another 30 or 40 points into a zone, and the opponent can't really do anything about it. We use hidden deployment in this way because there's no inclination that the model's there until the moment that you reveal it. The opponent might guess, but there's very little they can do. There's not a whole lot.
Yes, now there is a huge disadvantage to this strategy, and this is the orders that you will not be using.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Because if you plan on putting this model in the last turn to control the zone of the end console, then basically you are giving up at least 2 orders during the game for the first and second turn, and and this will be the orders you will not be having the game for the game. So it's usually the best to place such models in the second order group, so that you are not depleting your main order group that is doing stuff.
Right. Yeah. So if you are taking a more passive kind of second turn or end of game role with your hidden deployment, the cost of this is obviously you've got 30 to 40 points in your list that aren't perhaps contributing as much as they maybe could, and you're losing out on all of the orders that you're not spending in the first and second turns. I don't think either Perzan or I are saying it's an ineffective strategy. In fact, it's quite a common strategy. Lots of people do it.
It's very strong,
Yeah, it's
but you
it's
have to
very
like
strong.
know that on top of the points you are not using for the whole game, you
Yep.
are dead. Like there are lists I've been playing for like supremacy and like quadrant controls that have basically play on like 4 or 5 regular orders for the whole game because most of the stuff dies or is irregular. All of the other stuff is already in place. So they are already infiltrated or been deployed. So if you build a list for certain missions with hidden deployment and infiltration, you don't really need to use that many orders, and that's a huge like power kind of common infiltration and
Yeah,
hidden deployment.
yeah. So a lot of these hidden deployment models have infiltration anyway, so they can start up to halfway. Um, and that means that as much as you're losing orders by not revealing them, you're also gaining some orders in positioning and things as well. So it often does work out and can be very strong. As Perzan said, there are a couple of missions that score you for having points in different zones, in different quarters of the board. Um, and in those missions, the ability to suddenly pop up 30 or 40 points in a zone is incredibly powerful, so it's often worth doing. There is an additional use to these hidden deployed specialists, particularly the hackers, which is being able to take surprising hacking AROs or active turn moves. Is that something you use a lot, Persian, or are you not a big fan of that?
Well, it depends. Like I'm mainly playing Hack Islam, and Tuareg doesn't fit in many of my lists because I think it's a bit expensive for what it does as a hacking presence
Hmm.
because it doesn't have any BTS and
Yeah,
doesn't have
yeah,
survivability.
yeah,
So if there is a killer hacker or somebody else, it just dies.
yeah,
But on the other hand, if you have a tag just rampaging through your lines and you just happen to have a repeater network and a Tuareg hacker somewhere,
yeah,
and spring a trap either by the Tuareg or by the repeater, like even the flash boost bot like deployed on the edge of
yeah,
your deployment zone, but hidden, not like exposed, um, makes the tag very
definitely.
going nearby.
Hmm. And
Mhm.
one of the
So
I was going to say one of the beautiful things about the hacking ARO is that you can actually stay reasonably safe. So you could have your Tuareg like tucked in here or something.
mhm,
As an example, it doesn't have to be particularly exposed, but the the beauty of that is, you're covering like this, and you're covering this, kind of angle.
yes, exactly. Nomads obviously shine at that because they have the repeater network deployed and then hackers that are actually not in deployment but in their deployment zone.
Right.
So they make it
Hmm.
safer, I would say,
Definitely.
than
Definitely.
springing hidden deployed hackers. I don't think the proxies from the Aleph have the hidden deployment anymore on the
I,
hacker and the sniper. I
I
think
can't
they are
remember.
now just limit is -6,
Yeah.
but they were, I think, the best such unit
Hmm. They were quite cheap, weren't
because
they?
of the yeah and WI, I think.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
yes,
um,
like
yeah.
there's another like if you don't deploy like a hacker, then even any specialist like a Cryptos for observer
Hmm.
is a great hidden deploy hacker, and this is the military orders. There are those Trinitarians or whatever
Yeah.
they are called,
Trinitarians, I think.
with hidden deployment and hacker and port observer, I think,
Yes.
and they have a mine layer. So similarly to this Cryptos mine
Hmm.
layer, basically they are the same spot points wise. So they are like similarly to like 25 points, and 25 points for hidden deployment models is a bargain.
Yeah.
So if you can find a model that is sub 30 points for hidden deployment and brings either a mine or a specialist,
Hmm.
that's a great profile.
Yeah. So they're really good at zone control, right? Because you get the zone control of the mine, which is obviously a camo marker when you deploy it, so the enemy isn't entirely sure what it is, depending on the faction, right? So it's good zone control
Mhm.
there. And then you obviously get the zone control of the hidden deployed as well, because you get to pop out at some point, maybe you take some combi shots, or maybe you just move up later. It's a really effective mid-board presence, essentially.
Mhm. Yes. Now, there is one consideration I would like to talk about when deploying hidden deployment specialists, and that's the projected absence of them, I would say. So, if your opponent sees that you are missing some points and the mission calls for like controlling the middle console at the end of the game, there is a high chance that if they bring the sensor, they will be trying to censor your hidden deployment models. So sensor is the anathema for hidden deployment. Basically, every faction has an access to sensor bot, as we call it. So the FO remote. Apart from Ariadna, but they have dogs who snip.
Yep.
And basically, what you can do with such a bot is just move, and as a short skill, declare a sensor.
Hmm.
And sensor reveals all camo and hidden deployment models within 8 inches, so its
Yep.
zone of
It's
control.
huge. Hmm.
Yes, it's like, because of the base size, it's like actually like almost 20 inches circle diameter. And like not 20, like 18.
18. Yeah.
But yeah, but what you can do with it is you look for spots for hidden deployed models, and then you censor.
Right.
So if you have, say, a mine there and no other models nearby, there is a giveaway that within 8 inches there is a mine layer.
Right. Right.
Now,
Hmm.
if there is a console that is to be clicked, and you deploy your hidden deployment guy just here,
Hmm.
then you're asking for trouble, because the sensor, all he has to do is move to like vague, vague
Fake area.
proximity to your
Yeah.
model,
Yeah.
and then sensor,
Yeah.
and the sensor reaches like here.
8 inches. It's huge.
So yeah, so and this is not even a good spot because you still require 2 orders to click it.
Yeah.
So deploying the hidden deployed specialist for like grabbing the console last turn within like millimeters of the console is usually a bad idea. Like
Hmm.
if you expect the enemy to have a sensor and
Yeah.
know what he's doing with it.
Hmm. Yeah. So if it's at all likely that your opponent is bringing a sensor, it's a good idea to just think very carefully about where you're putting your hidden deployment, because the first thing your opponent's going to do is move the sensor bod up and just start sweeping and looking for your hidden deployment. So if your hidden deployment was off to one side, then of course they're probably going to miss it, and then maybe they waste more orders, right? Um,
Yeah, like basically deploying that's in the center of the table is usually a bad idea.
right.
If you are near the center and you need to go near the center, you either want to deploy him like 10 inches back or to one side, or if you want to be forward deployed, then you want deployed like off to the side, because mm, when you think about it, if you start with this model in the second order group and the model, he will have like 3 or 4 other orders and his own order, then you will still use his own order to arrive at the table, move like up to 8 inches. And then as long as you have like 1 order more to spend, you will still be able to click the thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. So it's very tempting to be greedy with the hidden deployment specialist, and I think, if you're deploying second and your opponent hasn't deployed a sensor remote or something, then maybe you can be greedy. But if they
Yeah,
have, you
definitely.
really benefit from being a bit smarter.
Yes, and like for me, that's the gripe with the hidden deployed hackers,
Hmm.
uh, because they are such a great ARO models that you want them deployed like in the most obvious spots that the tag will be
Right.
moving
Yeah. Yeah.
through.
Hmm.
Uh, and if you deploy them in such spots, then the sensor might just
Yeah.
reveal them. But
Absolutely.
it's not like it's not as common for the sensor to just randomly reveal spots on the table prior to the tag moving. If the mission doesn't reward like scoring the center console for the at the end, and the opponent is expecting you to bring a hidden deployment model,
Yeah.
either by you having like a model missing or
Mhm.
knowing that your faction shines at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely hidden deployment isn't something that you'll see in like every mission in every list. It really shines in some, but as Perzan's saying, there's the trade-off with the hidden deployment hackers because you want to be in a relevant place to take the hacking ARO, but the more relevant your position is, the more likely it is that you will get censored if the opponent's running censor, and that's why some of us like to, not take the obvious hacking AROs and to maybe leave it a while before we reveal ourselves, or to
Yeah.
put
And
ourselves off to the
what do
side.
you do if you have a hacker here deployed, and a sensor bot comes your way and like looks to be censoring, because there is no other way. There's no other function he serves there. Well, obviously you oblivion him
Right, so you just reveal yourself anyway and declare a proper ARO.
because because a sensor will reveal on like 90.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this is no
absolutely.
contest.
Um, so that's a little bit about hidden deployed specialists and the fact that we need to be aware of this trade-off between being in the most relevant place, but also not being in a place where we can get censored immediately, depending on lists. Spoken a little bit about hidden deployed AROs and how it can be quite neat to overlap them and just make sure they're in, kind of relevant places. I think the last thing to maybe focus on a little bit is some hidden deployed active turn gunfighters.
Mhm.
The Sphinx over here. Have we got a Hexa somewhere as well?
On the other side here.
Cool, we've got a Hexa. Swiss over there, yeah.
Oh yeah, Swiss and the
Swiss Guard.
Hexa is here.
Cool. Um, have you ever run a Swiss or a Hexa yourself, Perjan, or just had them run
I
against you?
am. I have been on the receiving end
Hmm.
because I am not majorly a panel player, but
Right.
yes, they are very good for like the price point
Hmm.
because of the high PS and like oh, PS 12 is like
Hmm.
nothing very high, but they are at a good price point.
Yeah.
And they don't have infiltration, so they are very similar to actually Noctifer Spitfire.
Yes.
Because you can have a Noctifer with a Spitfire. Uh, you just
So
never see them.
one question I was going to ask you, just to kind of illuminate this point, is what what's the main threat when you go up against someone running a Swiss Guard or a Hex or a Cutter? Like, what worries you most?
Well, I cannot kill them until he reveals them.
Right.
So that's the biggest threat because
Hmm.
I don't know where they are and where the threat is coming from. I can
Absolutely.
see like there are some models missing. Maybe I faced a list with 3 hexas,
Hmm.
and it was one of which like a specialist Spitfire and a sniper, and it was obvious there are plenty of points missing and plenty of models missing, but still like the place they were and like the routes they would take, and that was a big mystery to me. And then the Spitfire Hexa was perfectly safe to survive any
Right.
attacks I could throw at them, and then just pick a moment in the game to review, start killing stuff. And that's the biggest thing about the deployed active turn pieces.
Right.
Don't
So
need to use right away.
yeah. So there are a couple of things that make the hidden deployed active turn pieces really good. The first is that if your opponent takes first turn against you, there's almost nothing they can do to kill your hidden deployed active turn piece. It's very, very unlikely. They'd have to censor it and then kill it, right? So you're quite safe. The second
Mhm.
thing is that when you go to strike back in your turn, you could attack from all manner of angles. Your hidden point could be here, or it could be in the center, or it could be on the left, and the opponent won't know for sure which attack route you'll take. Um, and this is super relevant because when we deploy our ARO pieces, we often deploy them with a certain line of fire, looking down a certain path. But if your attack doesn't come from that path, often you might find you're shooting the ARO piece in the back or out of cover or something like that. And that's incredibly powerful.
like most of the hidden deployed active pieces will also have the benefit of marker state.
Mhm.
So they will have a camo state, and this is very powerful because even though they might have like a 4/4 movement like this Swiss guard, in the camo state they can reposition up to 8 inches without any relevant
Yep.
AOs, because the only relevant is like hold or discover.
Mhm.
And if they discover him and he just moves again, they just he's now in a new position.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's big. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely is. So, not only do you get the surprise attack of the hidden deployment, you know, the fact that you're coming from an angle that the opponent hasn't necessarily covered, you've also usually got a marker state to reposition, you know, so you can fall back on the camouflage to go to a different fire lane without attracting AROs.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I've played against Nomad lists recently that are running. Oh, what's the really good
Spectre?
hidden deployment? Um, is it the
Uh,
Spectre or something? Um,
yeah, the Spectre.
and the problem with the Spectre is that, you know, playing as a Hack Islam player, I'm setting up my overlapping fields of fire and trying to make sure that I have multiple ARO pieces facing down in kind of the same location to take things down, and then the hidden deployed appears out of nowhere and kind of ends up taking a side angle, and you can't really do anything about it. And that's the value of the
Mhm.
active turn hidden deployed. Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Now there's another category like mm, value pieces. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say this automatic
Yeah.
can be a lieutenant hacker in hidden deployment.
Mm-hmm.
That's there was a huge discussion on the forums lately. You can actually like declare dodge uh, from the other side of the table, but let's say you don't, because I don't think it's. Do you remember how Iron would rule that? Ian?
Which issue was it?
Revealing hidden deployed guys when the guy was like on the other side of the table.
Yeah, so
But
you
so,
can declare a dodge. You will be revealed as soon as you declare a dodge. It will be invalid, but you will be on the table.
yeah, so you can do this. Yeah,
Yeah,
so this is very gamey.
it is
Uh,
very gamey. It is allowed currently, but yeah, the downside is that actually some players think that it's not that good because you do lose your marker state because you declared a dodge. So,
yes, but still, if the purpose of the hidden deployment is to keep a very valuable model safe for the through the first turn, and still a good strategy.
there is a
Uh,
counterplay to this, by the way, just if we're talking about this. So, just to make it absolutely clear what Perzan and I are talking about, there's been a discussion recently where obviously you want to reveal your hidden deployments at the last possible moment in the opponent's turn so that you get their order added to your order pool, because if you don't reveal, their order has to be spent only on themselves to come onto the table. So people have said if the opponent moves a model like really far away, let's say here or here, it is technically allowed for your hidden deployed model here to declare dodge, and by declaring dodge, they will appear on the table and they will reveal themselves. Now, the ARO is invalid because obviously with your opponent over here you can't actually dodge, so it's an invalid ARO, but it doesn't matter because you've still appeared on the table. It's very gamey, but it is allowed. Um, Now, one of the funny things about this is that if your opponent declines to spend their last order, or if they move a model with stealth, you can't do it because you're not allowed to declare AROs to stealth. I, unless you have line of sight and a couple of other exceptions to the rule. So you can actually play around this trick. The stealth is really neat, I think, if you do want to play around it.
yeah, yeah, like to be double safe, like if you suspect the enemy model has like an automatic hidden, you need to like know something about his army and position and what he's missing. But if you suspect that he might be pulling this trick on you, then don't spend the last two orders, because like they will be expecting you to maybe not spend the last order. So double outplayed, or as or use a model with stealth to like reposition
Yeah.
line of fire to enemy.
Right.
Because if even if the model with stealth, like a camo, like moves somewhere, and say a Noctifer sees him, then the Noctifer, instead of calling a shoot or discover, could just reveal and say look out,
Yeah, he could look
and
at.
then this
Yeah.
model gets a dodge.
That's true. But I just think it's neat that you can play around it with stealth and things sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. Anyway, that's gamey, and you probably won't see it too often. Every now and again,
No,
it
but I
happens.
think it needs to be addressed, especially for like new players, because at some point somebody will try to use this trick, and
Yes.
it's not cool.
Yeah, it's
So
not
for
cool if you
example,
have no idea what's happening. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, its current state is that it is legal. Rules as written, it's gamey, but you will see it happen because it is allowed to
Do
happen.
you remember what was the reasoning? I think that was to allow for like hacking area. No, because that
Yeah.
was because zone of control cannot be pre-measured.
So, in N4 under the current rule set, there's no such thing as a zone of control ARO anymore. You just declare whatever ARO you want and measure afterwards. That's how the rules work now. And because you don't have to measure till the end, you can declare a completely ridiculous ARO, like a dodge from across the board, and then measure up. Now, half the time that's obviously stupid and it's not going to get you anything, but some of the time it does get you something, like putting your hidden deployment on the table, for example. Anyway, so we've talked a bit about the roles, so we talked about your ARO pieces, and obviously we didn't go too much into ARO pieces in general because we've done a whole class, talking about ARO pieces in a more specific capacity. We spent some time talking about the mid-board dudes, your kind of specialists that start over there. And then we did a little bit talking about the kind of advantages of hidden deployment in the active turn. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Perzan, or are we kind of about
Not really.
done?
I just wanted to add the sensor thing, and
Yeah.
that we added it.
Does anyone have any hidden deployment related questions that we can go over?
I have one.
Yes.
It's mostly very specific. A lot of the hidden deployment units come with a surprise attack, right?
Yes. Some of them do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but surprise attack only gives the opponent the penalty if you are in the active turn.
That's
not
correct.
as ARO.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for example, if you want to have make use of that, you will need to reveal from active during your active turn instead of using your hidden deployment as an ARO piece.
Absolutely, yes. If you want to use that surprise attack, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about how can I maximize the use of that Spectre, because I hear people saying that Spectre as a sniper is pretty good for nomads. Unfortunately, it only has 12 ballistic, so it's not a very great shooter.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking because I mostly hear snipers as being like an ARO weapon, I'm trying to think alright, I can't really use it as an ARO because I don't get the surprise attack, so it should be an active turn piece then.
So I think you've got a couple of different options. The first thing is, as an active turn sniper, it really relies on the fact that it's going to be almost uncontested. So it's the -6 from the mimetism. Then you've got the surprise attack, and you've probably got range as well. So that's what makes it quite good in the active turn. In the reactive turn, you are really just banking on the fact that your opponent might move into its line of fire because they don't know it's there, right? So they might move once, you don't see it, so you don't get an ARO. They move again, and you get a surprise ARO, which is amazing because you get an uncontested shot. If they're not in cover, you're on 15s. That's pretty good. The second thing to bear in mind is, even though you don't get the surprise attack, if your opponent's moving something like a rifle dude or an HMG dude, and you've got the range right, they're going to be on -3 for range, -6 for mimetism, and then -3 for cover. They're on the full -12, and they almost can't hit you anyway. So even without surprise attack, you're still doing a decent job as an ARO piece, if you want to use it that way. You don't have to.
Yes, I think for the sniper, hidden deployment sniper, positioning is the key for ARO. So you don't like we talked about positioning him like in the same position as the TR bot or somebody else. But imagine if you have a TR bot here protecting those lanes, and the way to deal with this TR bot is to move either through here and target it, or through here and target it from within like 16 inches range. And then a Spectre deployed here or here would be protecting this angle and this angle as the models approach to target your other ARO piece. And then if, say, a model approaches here, he might be moving, as Oli said, or just moving into target the TR bot from cover, but you will get a shot without cover from this angle.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Perzan's just said here is really important to bear in mind. Sometimes you can, if you're running hidden deployment, you can bait positioning mistakes by using another ARO piece. So if we had this Flammenspear dude up here, this Nadir, your opponent might move around this corner to here to take it on. Now you could have a hidden deployed guy, let's say, I don't know, here or something waiting. And when your opponent comes around this corner, you might be able to get a shot out of cover. So you can use your other pieces to bait your opponent into bad positions. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, definitely.
I think at the beginning Perzan said you could overlap a TR remote with some kind of hidden deployed sniper, and then when your opponent goes to take on the TR bot, you suddenly reveal the sniper, and they're like, oh shit, do I split my burst 2 and 2 to attack both, or do I take an unopposed shot? So that's kind of the value of it. But if the question specifically is it the worst thing in the world to lose surprise attack? No, I don't think it is. It's okay sometimes to forgo surprise attack. I think that's alright.
Yes, also there's a question about when to reveal hidden deployed ARO, and I don't think you should reveal as soon as you can. I think you should wait and bide your time, because if the enemy knows you are missing a model, the longer you are not revealing the model, the longer he needs to play around and take inoptimal routes and inoptimal decisions, like moving and dodging, moving and not moving with the second shot or the skill. So I think that the optimal bot, like if the enemy is not like in your deployment zone and killing like half of your army already, if he's like nearing your deployment zone or starting to threaten an important model, and he has like 2, 1 or 3 orders left, then it's the moment to spring a trap.
Yeah, so remember with hidden deployment, what you're actually paying for is surprise, right? And the quicker you reveal your surprise, the less impact it's making. You play mind games with hidden deployment. That's what it's all about. If you hand your opponent a list with 14 troops in, they know you're running hidden deployment, or parachutist, some kind of combat jump. They're going to spend their turns playing around that. They might leave some troops facing the back edge in case of combat jump. They might move more cautiously around terrain to avoid hidden deployed AROs. As soon as you reveal your hidden deployed dude, your hand is shown. You've played your card, right? So there's definitely something to be said to waiting a bit later. The end of the second turn. Perhaps if it's a hidden deployed specialist, as Perzan said, the end of the third turn, maybe. Because hidden deployment, even if it's not on the board, can still sometimes make your opponent make inefficient plays, moving more slowly, not crossing cover, using smoke to cover an advance that they might not need, that kind of thing.
Even more, if your faction has access to multiple different hidden deployed models, say combined army, like vanilla combined army, has access to both Malignos and Noctifar and amazing drop troops. So the longer you play with just 14 troops on the table, the longer you just don't know if it's a Rasyat Kodali, Noctifer, Hacker. And they serve very different purposes and can be deployed in a very different places. Yeah, so basically these are this is the best, the most advantage you will get from.
Anyway, are there any other questions, or shall we think about closing the stream for now?
Just a quick one. I hope you've not
Yeah.
covered it.
Yeah.
When combined with infiltration,
Yep.
you have to still roll to see if you can go on the other side of the board, don't you?
Yes, I should think so. Yeah.
Do
Yep.
you show that to your opponent? That roll?
You tell them that you roll.
You do. You do.
Okay.
You
That's
have to
what-
openly roll for a model that they don't see. Yes.
Interesting.
can
So I
actually
imagine a lot
have-
of the time you won't want to do that for the surprise factor.
Yeah, so you can actually have a GSA army with 6 hidden deployed models, or I think 7, because they have 3 Oniwabans, 3 ninjas, and Shinobi Kitsune. And I have seen a game where the player just made 4 rolls at the start of the game, without like saying the target numbers. Just I'm rolling now, passed. I'm rolling now, I passed. I'm rolling now, I failed.
Yeah.
I'm rolling now, I passed. And then you start the game, and you know something is up. And he was playing second, by the way. And you know something is up. And if you don't have sensor, you are just scared shitless.
Right, and particularly if the opponent doesn't know how many hidden deploys you have, right? So you could take 2, roll for 1, and then keep the other, and the opponent might think, oh, like, no one plays 2 hidden deployed, and I've seen him roll for 1, right? So he doesn't have another one. But you could, feasibly, depending on the points and things like that. So, would I roll as a matter of regularity? No, I don't think I would, because it does give the game away. But are there tricks to be played with rolling? Yeah, there definitely are some tricks that you can play with it.
Rad.
Yes. For example, with say Kipsos mine layer, you can actually roll like for the Toha. You can have Gao or Kipsos, and if you just roll and deploy a mine, you are rolling for like 9s, and Gao would roll for 10s. The difference is really not huge, but you can have a guy that looks like an Igao, but is actually a deployed mine. Hilarious.
Anyway, I think I might stop the stream there if that's alright with everyone.